turn your camera off. But we'll also be posting the recording as well as the presentation that we're showing this evening on the project webpage on boston.gov. You can see the web address there at the bottom of the page. Okay, yeah. And so before we get started, I just want to say a little bit about language access. The presentation will be available in English, Cantonese, and Mandarin. And so to select your desired language, you can click on the interpretation button on the Zoom control panel. It looks like a little globe, and choose whichever channel you prefer to interact with us in this meeting. So I'm going to pause there and I will let the interpreters go now. So maybe we'll start with Terry in Cantonese.
Thank you, William. Hi, my name is Terry Ying. I'll be your Cantonese interpreter. 大家好，我係 Terry， 我係你嘅廣東話翻譯。一陣咧，你喺屏幕下邊咧就會見到一個喺顯示出嚟咁樣嘅地球儀嘅圖標。你揀下嗰個地球儀嘅圖標，之後揀 Cantonese， 你就可以入到呢個廣東話嘅頻道啦。如果你係用手機或者係 iPad 上嘅話咧，你可以點下屏幕下邊3個點，再揀下更多，亦都有語言嘅呢個選項㗎。咁你亦都可以入到廣東話嘅頻道。OK， 多謝晒，一陣見。Thank you. Back to you, William.
Thank you, Terry. And I think I'll pass it over to Hui now for Mandarin.
Okay, thanks, William. 大家好，欢迎大家参加今天晚上有关 Downtown Crossing 这个地区街道改善这个项目的会议。我叫高慧，我是今天晚上的国语翻译。然后呢，请大家找一下在你的电脑屏幕上右下方呢，你应该能够看到有这个就是用这个红框标出来的这个口译翻译的这个有一个地球仪，然后呢，你就可以点击那儿，然后呢，你就可以选择普通话或者国语，就可以听到今天晚上会议的国语翻译了。谢谢。All set, William.
Okay, great. We'll give people just a moment to try to get into these rooms. If anyone does have a technical issue, feel free to write in the chat, or you can raise your hand with the reactions button. Let us know you're having a problem, and a member of our team will try to help you. Let's maybe translate that little piece too. Terry, you want to start?
Terry and Wei are in the interpretation
too late.
simultaneous,
okay.
Since it's live now.
Well, all right, we'll go simultaneous now. Fantastic. So just highlighting here a couple of the key functions of the Zoom control panel. Many of you will probably be familiar with these already, but the mute and unmute function, the camera on and off function, which again, I'll mention that we are recording this. So if you don't want to appear on camera, please turn your camera off. The chat box, throughout the presentation, you can feel free to leave questions or comments in the chat, and we will either a team member will address those in the chat box, or we'll touch on that when we have the Q&A session at the end of the meeting. The raise hand function is now located in the reactions button. So if you click the reactions button, you can find the raise hand button there. So we're going to begin today with a short presentation. We will have time for questions and comments after the presentation. We're going to have a couple of interactive questions during the presentation. But as I mentioned, you can post a question at any point in the chat box or raise your digital hand. And again, the presentation will be recorded and posted on the project's webpage on boston.gov, along with the slides from today's presentation. I'll also mention that those slides will be available in Chinese as well on the project webpage within the next few days. So thank you again for joining us. So brief agenda for today. We'll start with an introduction of the project, kind of an overview of our goals and purpose. We'll look at the anticipated schedule. And then we're going to dive into 5 key themes for the project: access and mobility, activation, environment, precedents from peer cities, and then a brief look at some early thinking about new possibilities for some of the streets in the district. And then we'll close with time for questions and comments. So, the purpose of this project, I kind of put this as to bring the streets into a state of good repair, and because, at the most basic level, this is about just fixing some of the issues with the existing streets. But, now is the time, if we're going to be rebuilding any of these streets, to think about, if we want to put them back in a way that's maybe a little bit different and better than what was there before. And to that point, we really want to make sure that whatever we design amplifies and builds on what already makes this a really great district, right? Its proximity, its energy, its vitality, its activity, its diversity. And we really want to ensure that also this project helps to support Downtown Crossing as an inclusive, active, and really economically vibrant area for decades to come. And I should also highlight that in addition to that, we have some sort of big overarching city goals or plans like Go Boston 2030 that, all of our street projects, we look at through a lens of, trying to encourage more people to walk, to bike, to use public transportation. And additionally, it goes without saying that we want to design all of our streets to be safe for all users, regardless of what mode of transportation they use. And so that ties in with the city's Vision Zero goals and policy of trying to eliminate all serious injuries and fatalities from crashes from our streets. So saying a little bit about the project scope in terms of the streets that make up this project, Washington Street from Temple Place to School Street. I should just mention most of the streets that are here are part of the existing pedestrian zone, with the exception of School Street and a portion of Bromfield Street. But yeah, as I said, Washington Street, Winter Street and Summer Street, Bromfield Street and School Street are the streets that make up the scope of this project. So we will be looking to make improvements to all of these key downtown streets. Our team that's gathered here, so this project is jointly managed by BTD, the Boston Transportation Department, and our Public Works Department. And we have a really exciting consultant team assembled, led by HDR, who's helping with engineering and planning services. And then we have a sub-consultants tool design group who are assisting with other aspects of the transportation planning, Sasaki for landscape architecture and design. And then we also have Booyah Engineering and Bryant Associates for electrical engineering and surveying, respectively. So that's our team. A little bit about the anticipated schedule. For the last couple of months, we've been very busy collecting existing conditions, information, surveying the streets in the district, and preparing to kick off this public process. So we had our first meeting as an outdoor pop-up event. We were out on Summer Street for 7 hours straight, talking to neighbors, visitors, shop owners, the full range of people who use Downtown Crossing for one reason or another. And maybe some of you are repeat visits, who knows? But we're just now beginning the public process, and we'll take the feedback that we get from this evening, and we'll run with that and start working on a conceptual design. And the goal is to have a conceptual design completed by winter 2021, early 2022. By conceptual design, we mean basically what it sounds like. We've done a lot of work to consider the feasibility of the options that we're putting forward, but there's still a lot of details to refine in the design, both through sort of more detailed engineering and through sort of continued community engagement to make sure that we're getting things right with the design. I do want to highlight, we have the two different colors here in the schedule, because currently this project is funded through this conceptual design phase. That's not unusual. That's oftentimes how these projects work. But I just want to highlight that we will need to get additional funding to complete the design and construction, but it is, fully our intention to take this project and carry it all the way through to construction. That ideally we would see underway around 2024. So the goals of today really are just to help sort of socialize the project and familiarize all of you with the scope and goals of the project, share some very, very high level initial ideas. And based on that, we want to solicit your input. Those of you who live, work, shop, or pass through Downtown Crossing to really inform the next stages of this process. So before we really get underway, we're going to launch our first live poll just to kind of get a sense of who's here and what brings you to the district. So we have 2 multiple choice questions. So if you'll take a moment to respond to those. And then the third question is open-ended. You can put in the chat if you like, just one word, how you would describe Downtown Crossing today. So we'll take just a minute on this. Excited to see what some of these open-ended responses are going to yield.
Just a couple more seconds for the poll.
Mhm.
It's like 26 of us have responded, so. Okay, I'll go ahead and share the results.
Okay. Okay, so we have a lot of Downtown Crossing and downtown residents, sort of a plurality of Boston residents. So yeah, welcome everybody, whether you're living in the district or somewhere else in and around Boston. And then just looking at what brings people to Downtown Crossing, Workers' School for about 60%, the same for shopping. About 40% of the attendees call Downtown Crossing home. 54% say events, theater, cultural events, and then about a third of you said it's something else altogether. So interesting stats. Zach or Liz, would somebody want to read a couple of the comments coming in the chat?
We got some good one-word descriptions. We got nexus, mishmash, heartbeat, vital, ready, confusing, little rundown and shabby. Some people said regrowing, beauty and the beast are some of the descriptions we're getting. So some interesting descriptions of the Downtown Crossing area. Thank you.
I love it. I love it. Thank you. No, good stuff. So diving in then to the meat of the presentation. So again, these are the 5 themes that we're going to talk about in at some length tonight. So first of them is access and mobility. This is how we move through the space and accommodate access for all the different modes and needs, service and public safety. Activation, which is how we use and enjoy the space. Environment, which is how we accommodate the existing site constraints. Precedents. So we're going to look at how we can incorporate great ideas from other peer cities around the globe. And then finally, the new possibilities, where we go from here, kind of these early ideas about how we might be able to reimagine a couple of the streets in this study area. So again, just Downtown Crossing, as somebody said, it's a nexus of mobility in Boston, which of course is itself known as the hub of the universe. And first and foremost, when we talk about access and mobility, I think it's really, really important to talk about walking. On the average weekday pre-COVID, we had more than 50,000 people a day walking through Downtown Crossing to board the T. And in a single hour, at peak hour, many of the blocks in the study area have more than 5,000 pedestrians in just 1 hour, which is, huge volumes. Hard to imagine many other streets in the city competing with these kinds of pedestrian volumes. And although COVID has impacted this somewhat, it's really great to see that there's still a lot of life and activity, people on the sidewalks and streets of the downtown crossing district still. Also, the adjacent bike network has been expanded in recent years, providing connectivity for all ages and abilities to and around downtown crossing. While we're talking about walking, I think it's also important to talk about surface condition and accessibility. We recognize that a lot of the existing sidewalks are narrow and they are often in a challenging state of repair. It's a very nice way of putting it. And often, they're not compliant with ADA regulations, meaning they're not accessible for people who need to use a wheelchair or another mobility device. And, these are some of the most important historic streets, busy streets right in the heart of the city. And so that's a really important mission in this project, is to really expand and ensure the universal access to these great assets that are the downtown crossing streets. In terms of vehicular access, most of the study area is a pedestrian zone and private vehicles are prohibited. That doesn't mean we don't occasionally get them in the zone. Certain vehicles are permitted during certain times of day. So taxis are permitted from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m., commercial vehicles from 6 p.m. to 11 a.m., and public vehicles and others with special permits can enter at any time. As we'll see in some of the slides up ahead, though, we do have some issues with compliance across the board that create some challenges for this district kind of functioning as the highest and best version of itself. So that's kind of one of our goals, is trying to bring a little bit more functionality to that. Most of the curbside space that does exist in the study area is primarily dedicated to commercial vehicles. Wanted to take a moment to talk about School Street for a second here, because it's kind of a unique street within the study area. This is the only eastbound route for vehicles to cross Washington Street between Essex and Sudbury. I should highlight, of course, that this street is unlike the portions of Washington's winter and summer that are in the study area. This street is open to vehicles at all times. It's also the only vehicle access to Province and Bromfield Street. And so, we recognize that really important role of School Street as a connection in the vehicular network for downtown, and a place that residents and businesses use to access homes and to get loading. But it's also really important context to note that this is a really important connection for pedestrians too. A very historic street. The Freedom Trail runs down this street, and pedestrians outnumber vehicles nearly 4 to 1 on this street. Today they're sort of competing for the limited space in this historic area, and so we want to sort of honor both of those. The importance of the street for both of those modes, but maybe better balance things towards pedestrians who are the predominant user of the street. Here in blue, you can see the existing pedestrian zone, which includes all of Winter Street, a portion of Summer Street, the bits of Washington Street that are within the study area, and a little piece of Bromfield and Franklin Street. The project limits shown here in red, you can see, again, mostly overlap with the existing pedestrian zone. Looking a little bit more at the pedestrian context, this is just to highlight some of the blocks here where you're seeing, again, the importance of this district as a pedestrian district, about 5,000 peak hour pedestrians on each of these blocks. Also just showing the density of public transit stops in the area, and the number of weekday boardings that we have at these various MBTA stations. And so, there's a really important relationship here between the public transit and the streets above ground, right? They sort of are feeding each other. a steady flow of passengers and pedestrians. And while we're here, I think it's also just important to highlight sort of the connectivity to some of the other nearby assets, right? Very close to America's oldest public space, the Boston Common, as well as to other important destinations like Government Center, the Chinatown neighborhood, financial district. So moving along, we can also see the bicycle network that's starting to emerge in and around downtown Crossing. We have facilities that extend basically up to Temple Place today, on Washington Street, facility on Tremont Street going southbound. While there's still some connections that are lacking here, it is starting to come together. And we also have connections, I should say, on Franklin Street and Summer Street as well for bikes. And the blue dots here represent the public bike share, the blue bike stations that are in the vicinity of the project. But I think, as I highlighted earlier on, walking and pedestrians really are the sort of the top of the pyramid for us here and the first priority in this district. And we really want to reinforce that pedestrians come first. And so, while that means that we want to accommodate bikes, we need to, of course, accommodate loading. We want to allow nearby space for rideshare services like Uber and Lyft, at the periphery of the district. But the really important thing is just making sure, again, that pedestrians feel comfortable and safe, and that all these modes are coexisting. So we have a lot of work to do. Another challenge that's really going to, I think, determine the ultimate success of this project is if we can improve the existing loading operations. So as I mentioned earlier, the official permitted loading window for the pedestrian zone is 6 p.m. to 11 a.m. But a lot of loading happens throughout the day. Again, as I've highlighted, this is obviously critical to the functioning of downtown businesses and services that really contribute to this being a lively destination. But on the other hand, it can also feel very uninviting if you have Winter Street totally parked up with large trucks at the same time that you have sort of the peak volume of people wanting to walk down the street. And so we need to find through this process solutions that allow loading to work for the businesses and tenants of these buildings, but also that respects during the hours of sort of peak pedestrian use the importance of these streets as pedestrian priority streets. Another note that we should touch on is access control. So today, as you're probably aware, there is not much in the way of someone who wants to drive into downtown Crossing. Sometimes we have little flexible signs at the entrance here on Washington Street at Temple Place, but those are easy to move aside, and not much to prevent unauthorized vehicles from entering the zone. So this is really important for two reasons, right? We want to make this space feel more like a pedestrian priority space where pedestrians are comfortable walking, using the whole street. So it's important to sort of limit unauthorized vehicle access for that reason, but also just, should, somebody want to do harm to someone, driving a vehicle into a crowd or something like that, it's really important that we have some sort of robust means of keeping, that from happening. But, conversely, whatever we choose, some form of barrier or something like that will need to be approved by emergency services. So, we don't want to slow response times for fire trucks or for ambulances or police. So, that'll be another important piece for this project to work out. So we're going to pause here and have some questions about the access and mobility theme. So what mode of transportation do you use to get to Downtown Crossing is question number 1. And question number 2 is, and what, in your opinion, what are the biggest mobility needs in Downtown Crossing? And if we miss something in these multiple choice, feel free to put a response in the chat too. And then finally, the open-ended question, what would you propose to improve the functionality of Downtown Crossing? How do you feel like the district could work better? Its streets could work better?
I'll just give a few more moments for the poll to be open. Okay. And the poll now.
All right, let's see. Okay, so we have a whopping 65% of people walk in the district. Just under 10% use a bike or scooter. A little over 20% use public transit, and around 4% use a personal vehicle. I'm surprised to see that nobody marked either taxi or rideshare, but yeah, interesting responses there from our attendees. Going down to what are the biggest mobility needs at Downtown Crossing, we see over 40% said wider sidewalks, about 10% said better loading management. Over a quarter of you said better access control for unauthorized vehicles. About 13% said more bike racks and bike amenities. Nobody said more bike share, and 9% said other. So interesting stuff. Oops, going back. Zach, would you want to read off a couple of the responses about the proposed improvements?
Yeah, we've got a few responses. Enforcement, more safe bike lanes, cycle tracks, shift School Street to better accommodate volume of pedestrians. Yeah, repair of dangerous sidewalks. Someone said no more bricks. I understand those can be a challenge. Water drainage, enormous puddles out there. So yeah, definitely some of the issues that we've observed.
Yeah, great responses all around. Thank you for those. So moving on to the next theme is activation, and this is really about how this project can continue to support kind of all the positive activities that are already happening in the district. So this slide here sort of shows a little bit of a theory or a thesis here that we have of Washington Street as really the pedestrian spine that connects the Downtown Crossing district. And along that sort of main spine for pedestrians, you have 3 sort of distinct nodes or character zones. One is the Summer and Winter Street node. These are fully pedestrianized streets that are flush with no separation of the sidewalk from the street. We have the Franklin and Washington Street node, and we have the School and Washington node where the Irish Famine Memorial is. And we just want to recognize that each one of these zones, if you're familiar with the district, kind of has its own character, and we want to make sure that with whatever we propose in this project, we're sort of respecting sort of the unique characteristics of each one of these nodes. And so we're going to touch on these briefly here. So first up, Washington Street. An interesting thing about Washington Street is that it's the only street that's in the pedestrian zone today that is, predominantly curbed. So meaning that it has, sidewalks at a raised elevation from the roadway, similar to a conventional street. We have huge volumes of pedestrians on the sidewalks on Washington Street. But a really important observation that we've seen here on Washington Street is that people don't really feel safe stopping in the center of Washington Street. They tend to sort of stick to the sides on the sidewalks. So even though the whole space is hypothetically a pedestrian space and can be used by people walking, various aspects of the street, how it functions and how it looks today, mean that people kind of tend to treat it almost much more like a conventional street, right? They're on the sidewalks. We think this is kind of a function of both the street having occasional vehicular uses, so trucks that are loading, traveling through, unauthorized vehicles that can enter the area today, kind of make it feel uninviting down in the roadway. And also just the fact that the street has sidewalks and curbs separated from the, in a separate elevation from the roadway, kind of sends a message that this is a space where you might encounter vehicles and isn't for pedestrians first and foremost. So I think that's the important point here. Summer Street, just around the corner, like Winter Street, is a flush street. So unlike Washington Street, these pedestrian streets are very, very well used, the entire street by pedestrians. They have no problem sort of taking ownership of the middle of the street, crossing where they like. And, the street also is a street that supports a lot of programming like markets and cafe seating. The Franklin and Washington Street node is another sort of distinct node along the corridor. And the main thing that I'd like to point out here is sort of the importance of this location for programming and people watching. The seating in the form of the stairs that were added to this MBTA entrance or head house has proven to be really, really popular, both for watching performances and for just the age-old pastime of people watching. And another important thing about this part of the district is that there's a nice variety of seating too. You have kind of both the fixed option here and the movable tables and chairs that kind of give people an option to to sit however works best for them in this part of the district. And then the final character area is at School Street. And so School Street, as we mentioned, very important historic street. And there's, it sort of terminates at Washington Street at this really charming little plaza with the Irish Famine Memorial. And unlike other areas in the district, it's the only one that really has substantial trees and plantings. And it has a sort of a fixed enclosed seating area that kind of creates this sort of nice sense of like an outdoor room that's very, very popular as well. And so, again, we're not at this stage really proposing any major changes at any of these places. We just want to recognize that each one kind of has its own characteristics, its own possibilities, and recognize that in our thinking about the project. And ultimately, we want whatever designs we put forward to support all those positive activities that are already happening in the district today, whether that's, more passive uses like just people watching or sitting for a coffee or a snack, or, sort of more intentional programming of the space like performances. And, there might be opportunities when we're rethinking the streets to include things like electrical hookups or other aspects that make the programming a little bit easier and more more effective. So that was the activation section. We'll pause here for yet another live poll. So first off, what are the events that bring you to Downtown Crossing today? And second, what amenities do you think would help better activate on Downtown Crossing? Whether that's additional seating, additional lighting. Again, I mentioned those electrical connections for public use. So whether that's for the occasional event or for maybe charging your cell phone, and of course, additional greenery, whether that's planters or trees. Let's hear what everyone has to say on these. Oh, and then the last one is kind of more open-ended. How would you like Downtown Crossing to feel? These poll questions are a good water break.
Just a last moment to get the polls in.
Okay. And I can't see the chat right now, but it looks like there's a lot of activity there, 71 comments. So that's good. Looks like there's some active participation there too. So what events currently bring you to Downtown Crossing? We have over 60% saying work. Sort of related to that, 35% say commuting, 70% say entertainment, and almost 80% say shopping. So, reinforcing kind of that idea of Downtown Crossing as an important employment, entertainment, and shopping district. What amenities would help activate Downtown Crossing? Almost half of you said additional seating. Over 60% said additional lighting or pedestrian scale lighting. 15% said electrical connections for public use. And the majority of you who responded said that you would like to see additional greenery, 92%. So that's great. Zach, you want to read off a couple of the open-ended responses?
Yes, my favorite part. Yeah, so how do you want Downtown Crossing to feel? Safe and energetic. I want it to feel more like a place for pedestrians and not just a road with do not enter sign. More historic, more greenery, hyper local food carts was a suggestion. Partnering with some local businesses, more inviting. We got that a couple times. Yeah, so welcoming to everyone, like to feel more dynamic. Those are some of the highlights. Great.
Thank you. Zach's a very talented engineer, but he can also read very well. So
one of my few talents, but yeah.
All right. So our next theme is environment. So, we have to recognize this is a very old district in the city. And so there are a lot of existing constraints that are going to require some creative thinking and solutions. We chose these images specifically because we want to highlight some of the messy challenges that lie underneath our feet in this district. So there's a lot of MBTA assets, so red and orange line tunnels, including the Winter Street Concourse, that pedestrian tunnel that runs underneath Winter Street. We have a confusing sort of tangle of spaghetti of utilities underneath the street. And then we have a lot of existing area ways or hollow sidewalks. This is, where we have basements that run underneath the sidewalk. And we've identified potentially as many as 80 basements underneath the sidewalk in the project area. So, that all of these things obviously influence, what we can do above ground as well. And just all this is to say, it's a lot of boring work that hopefully you'll never have to see. but that's really, really important in terms of getting things right. And despite the existing constraints, we really do also want to respond to sort of the challenges of a changing climate, and make sure that this district is resilient in the decades that come. Many of the comments that we've received already in the pop-up talked about issues with puddling and Washington Street sort of becoming a river during heavy rains. So we definitely want to find ways of better managing stormwater, introducing more greenery in the form of trees or plantings. But again, some of these constraints are going to determine what this ultimately looks like. We might end up having to have a lot more sort of raised planters and things like that, given the underground challenges in this district. And I think environment, I guess I should also say, beyond just the challenges, is also how the district feels today. And so we'd like to know, first off, kind of what character would you like Downtown Crossing to have? Do you want it to feel historic, modern, more green and soft than it does today? Or do you like sort of the paved sort of urban hardscape feel? Doesn't have to be a negative thing, right? So yeah, let us know how you feel about that one. And then the second question here, that's the open-ended response for the chat. What are the defining features of this district that we should really preserve or enhance? Again, we're thinking about the streets themselves, not the buildings or the land uses. But yeah, in terms of kind of the streets and the street furnishings, what are the aspects that you like that are out there today?
Give everyone one more moment for the poll.
Mm-hmm.
William, a water break.
Very important. Great. And we have the results here. So we have around 35% saying they would like it to have a historic feel, just under 20% saying a modern feel, and close to 50% saying they would like it to have a more green or soft feel, and nobody likes the paved hardscape out of those who responded. So yeah, very, very interesting response. And I would say there are probably opportunities for all of those, although they seem to be in conflict. One of the kind of amazing things, in my opinion, about Boston is that sort of confluence and adjacency of historic and modern. So Zach, you want to read off a couple of the responses?
Yeah, you know it. Planters, car-free, space for pedestrians and bikes. Let's see, like the steps, like Summer Street as an example, the steps should be preserved. A lot of comments on those. Enhance the historic feel and places for people to gather. The feeling of the past and present meeting in the neighborhood. Yeah, so yeah. Tables and chairs. Yeah, the steps again. Yeah, so all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Really great, thoughtful responses. And I can confirm that we are not planning to demolish the stairs or the Irish Family Memorial. We will definitely preserve those and agree that that's been the steps have been a great asset for the neighborhood. Okay, moving on to our next to last theme, our presidents. So looking at some peer cities and ideas that we can sort of borrow from and adapt to Downtown Crossing. So we've chosen a couple of cities here from around the country and around the world. There are, no shortage of precedent images we could have looked to. So, if we left out your favorite pedestrian street, it's nothing personal, but these are a couple that members of our team have, know and love. And, we see elements in all of these that we could, potentially borrow from. So the first is Ithaca Commons in Ithaca, New York. We like that this is, an inclusive, welcoming environment and public realm for both residents and visitors. And, we feel like that's really an element that's really present in Downtown Crossing today, is that it feels like a space that is open to visitors from all over the city, and is welcoming to visitors, from not just all over the city, but also all over the world. This space has some really nice features, from kind of the abundant greenery, ample seating, in a variety of forms, both fixed and movable, and some really nice little artistic touches as well, that just add sort of those thoughtful and engaging moments that that we'd like to potentially include in a redesign of this district and some of its streets. The next one is the Fulton Mall in Brooklyn, New York. This is another example of a really successful and diverse district that sits on top of a major transit hub. In the case of this street, it actually is closed to through traffic but open to buses. We're not proposing that for Downtown Crossing, but we do want to highlight some of the features of this street. The really kind of wide sidewalks that complement all the active ground floor uses, like we see in Downtown Crossing, and some of these images here showing that that they're also thinking about for this district and some of its surrounding streets, expanding some of the car-free streets and shared streets in this district. So again, a lot of these sort of key elements that we see repeated, the presence of greenery, things like historic lighting, and a mix of fixed and movable seating that that helps to kind of populate, activate the space, and make it feel inviting. The next example that we're going to look at is Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania's Market Square. So this is at the very heart of Pittsburgh. And, it's an inviting shared street that surrounds a central gathering space in a historic downtown. And I should just say, what do we mean by a shared street? So unlike, the streets like Winter Street and Summer Street, that are most of the day intended to be fully pedestrian, a shared street is a street that is open to traffic, but there's all kinds of cues that tell you that that pedestrians are around, that they can also use the street. And so the message to drivers is that this is kind of a special place where you shouldn't be speeding through, and you should be aware of the presence of pedestrians and share that space. And so again, this is as you can see, kind of a public square here in a historic downtown, surrounded by kind of this inviting shared street. And we feel like this could be an interesting precedent for Downtown Crossing, because a few of the streets that we intend to continue to be open to vehicular traffic, like Bromfield Street or School Street, might function well, thinking about something kind of along the lines of a shared street. And then I hope there are no Danes on the call, because my Danish is very rusty, so I'm not going to try to pronounce this. But the Strøget in Copenhagen is a really amazing pedestrian street. It's one of the longest pedestrian streets in Europe. Super vibrant and dynamic. It's nearly 2 miles long. A really important aspect of this is that it really has a number of sort of significant changes in character throughout the length of the pedestrian street. So even though it's like a much larger scale than Downtown Crossing, we feel like there's sort of some comparable aspects here with the historic context and those different character nodes and sort of the opportunities to really leverage and enhance those different character nodes as you pass through the zone. And you see here some of the things that we do in Downtown Crossing today, like seasonal decoration, public art, and programming, that we would of course recommend continuing. And then my former home of several years, Madrid, Spain, the Puerta del Sol. This is a really wonderful public space at the center of the city of Madrid. It's an integrated public space at the very heart of the city over a major transit hub. And so in my mind, this sort of quarter of Madrid functions very similarly to Downtown Crossing. It provides connections to important shopping destinations, historic and cultural destinations, and has that network of public transit running underneath the streets that helps to feed it and keep it feeling lively. And you see a lot of really lovely sort of pedestrian friendly and pedestrian first treatments here. Some of these streets are open to vehicles at various times of day, but you can see that rather than just resorting to bollards everywhere, there are different ways that you can sort of delineate spaces for different modes. So they've used in these images trees and street lighting very, very effectively to kind of create sort of that sense of separation and delineation in the street. But again, the way that these streets look and read, with the pavers, tells you that the whole street is intended to be used by pedestrians. And also notice how all these streets are flush, from building to building, similar to Summer Street and Winter Street today. So our live poll question for our precedents section, and both of these are actually open-ended, so we'll give you a minute or two to respond to these. But what resonates about the case studies shown? Are there things that you particularly liked in the images that you saw in specific cities? Things you didn't like? Let us know. And if you know other great pedestrian streets around the world that you would really like us to look at for inspiration, let us know about that too. And I'll just say again quickly that the examples that we saw again were Ithaca, New York, New York City at the Fulton Mall, Market Square in Pittsburgh, Stroget in Copenhagen, and the Puerta del Sol in Madrid. And I'll also say that that we're going to have time for questions and comments at the end. So you can write a quick response now if you'd like to respond in more detail at the end of the presentation in just a couple minutes, we can do that too. Okay, and we are almost at the halfway point of this meeting. So I'd say let's wrap up the responses so that we can wrap up the presentation, and we'll get on to the Q&A very shortly. Zach, do you want to read off a couple of the responses to these two questions?
Sure. Just talking, and as you were showing them, we were getting a lot of responses. It resonated with the pattern paving in Stroget in Denmark and Copenhagen. There's a comment about no sidewalk and having potentially a flush street. And then some suggestions here. I'm just reading them as they come. Pearl Street in Boulder, Colorado. Use of trees and greenery, level streets, building to building, lights hanging over the street, pedestrian scale lighting. Delft, Netherlands to take a look at. Ithaca with the plantings was nice, and Madrid was open and inviting. Yeah, so a lot of good stuff here that we can, lots of comments about the greenery and everything as I'm taking a look at it. A lot of really thoughtful responses that we can definitely take in. So yeah, thank you all for this. This is great. Yeah, a lot of good recommendations for other locations. So we'll definitely save this chat and take a look at some of these things and get into these in more detail. Thank you
Great.
all. Yeah.
Thank you. So our final section of the presentation is taking a really sort of high level look at some of the new possibilities for some of these streets. So just a quick look at the existing conditions. Most of you who joined probably know these streets very well, but these are the way that they look today. Literally the way that they look today, because Kevin from our team took these photos this afternoon. So Winter Street being a flush street, and we are proposing to keep it as such. So not necessarily changing that condition on Winter Street, but we can think about changing the paving materials, lighting, things like that. And then Bromfield and School Street are both streets that have the sidewalks and the pavement are in kind of rough condition today, have accessibility challenges, and we could rebuild them much as they are today, or we could kind of rethink them and think about maybe making these more sort of like curbless shared streets, like we saw in some of the example images earlier. So as we've said, some of our thinking that we kind of want to get your early feedback on is how you feel about curbless streets, that can encourage pedestrians to use the full street, where they, where the streets are pedestrianized, and then on the shared streets, to kind of reinforce for drivers that that there are people walking around and that they're the the priority user in this particular district. So again, seeing some existing condition photos here, and we spoke briefly earlier about sort of what a shared street treatment looks like. We have here another image from Madrid, Spain, and from Bogota, Colombia, of these sort of curbless shared streets. And this is just sort of a very, very, very rough sort of conceptual look at how Washington Street could potentially look if we were to make it flush. So I want to highlight as we look at these renderings that these are not designs. They're just high-level concepts. We still have so much work to do, discussions to have with abutters to figure out exactly what this will look like. But the key here is just kind of driving home that idea that we could make the streets in the pedestrian zone feel more like a continual pedestrian space, and do that by making the streets completely flush. We're showing bollards here to separate the space, but that of course doesn't have to be what we use in the end condition. Like we saw in some of the precedent examples, we could use planters or trees if there's space underground for roots to grow and thrive. We could use seating, street lights, a variety of things besides just bollards that we could use to delineate that space. And we can also play with different paving materials and colors to potentially sort of highlight different uses on the streets. So, maybe we can use this to sort of highlight zones that during certain times of day are for loading, but, are generally sort of pedestrian. So, this is all, again, with sort of the objective of making this district more accessible, more inviting to pedestrians, and making the streets that are in the pedestrian zone feel more truly pedestrian. And then for School Street, as we mentioned, we're still proposing to retain vehicular access for School Street, so that you can get over to Washington Street and points beyond, so that you can get over to Province and Bromfield Street. And we'll definitely need to think about creating spaces for on-street loading, for the restaurants and businesses that are along here. But that said, as we saw earlier, there are very, very high pedestrian volumes. We counted in a 12-hour period over 15,000 pedestrians and about 3,500 cars. So, pedestrians outnumber vehicles by a considerable margin, and we know that it's not a great experience today. School Street is not the best version of its amazing historic self. And so, wouldn't it be great to, have a School Street where you had some wider pedestrian path, nice smooth materials, so that you didn't have to be looking down at your feet. You could actually look up and appreciate, the amazing historic buildings and all the activity around you. And again, we're not highlighting, I mean, at this stage, this is not meant to suggest any materials or anything like that. Specifically, we're not saying we want to get rid of all the brick and replace it with something else. This is just sort of high level concept to show kind of conceptually some of these possibilities. So yeah, this is the last poll question. Within the pedestrian zone, so that's Washington Street mainly. Do you prefer the streets to be curbed or curbless? And again, that means would you rather have there be a separate elevation for the sidewalk, or do you like the look and feel of having the street and the sidewalk at the same level? And then question number 2 is, would you support a shared street treatment for either School Street or Bromfield Street, or both? And I promise we're getting really close to the end of the presentation, and we'll turn to those questions and answers very soon.
Okay, one more moment.
Mhm.
Very strong responses here.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. All right. Well, we have 100% of the people who responded like curbless streets in the pedestrian zone. Almost 80% say, and then for the second question, would you support a shared street for either School or Bromfield Street? About 80% say yes for both. 13% say yes for School Street, and 8% say yes for Bromfield Street. And nobody hates the idea for both of them. So really interesting early feedback. And I think it kind of tracks very well with what we were hearing from our pop-up meeting on Friday as well. Okay, so that is pretty much the presentation. Just throwing up the schedule again here, highlighting again that we're just beginning the public process. I will say that we have on the project webpage on boston.gov. We'll have the URL at the end of the presentation, but you can also just Google Downtown Crossing street improvements. We will be posting these materials there again, and there is also a sign-up sheet there for updates. So as the project moves forward and we have future public meetings, if you sign up, we will send you an email just letting you know when we have upcoming meetings. And yeah, so that is all for now. So we're at the question and comments stage of the evening. So if you do have a question, you can type it in the chat box, or you can raise your hand, and the moderator will announce your name and unmute your microphone, and either myself or Zach will respond to your questions. So yeah, thank you everybody for your patience and spending your evening with us through the presentation. Do we want to go to the chat first? Are there questions there? I'm sorry, I haven't been able to follow the chat.
We've been trying to keep up with the chat between Kevin and I and answering some of the questions. I think we've answered most of them, and there's also been just a lot of general great comments in here. I can't wait to save it and share it with you, William, and everybody so we can take a look at it. But yeah, so I would say, yeah, if we want to just have people raise their hand and take some questions. And yeah, if for some reason we didn't get to your question in the chat, you can raise your hand and we can ask it now.
Mm-hmm.
So we have 2 folks that have their hand raised. Rosemary's first.
Okay.
Rosemary, I'll go ahead and let you speak now.
I don't, that's not me speaking. I mean, that's not me asking a question. I don't know who it is.
Okay, I just saw that your hand was raised. So
Yeah, no, I don't know I don't know how that's happening.
no worries. Thank you for
Well,
participating.
yeah. Well,
Yep.
good. Yeah, good to hear from you, Rosemary.
Yep.
And
okay.
then we have Yoon as well.
Sure. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Very good. Hey, thanks for this presentation. So a couple of comments, thoughts, and you guys can respond if you could.
Mhm.
I think, I live in downtown Crossing area and I walk these streets every day.
Mhm.
And while it's I'm the one who says Beauty and the Beast, because there are good parts and there are bad parts. And one
Mhm.
of the things that I could just immediately comment is, I mean, the DPW just treats this streets like my 14-year-old's, picking on his face on his zit, the zits on his face, always picking at it. So you guys have these nice, beautiful pavers, and you guys are always tearing it up.
Mm.
And just, you look at all these pictures that you've shown of all these different cities. Look at those pictures. Can you find in any one of those pictures where it's just torn up and left to shambles? And you've shown some of our streets. I think, yeah, one of the pictures that you showed earlier had, some asphalt,
Mhm.
filled in on some of the pipe works.
Mhm.
Underground pipe work. So that's one thing. I mean, is that some, once I'm done with the comment, you can respond. Is that something that you guys can control? And if you guys do use pavers, can you, once you tear it up, can you put it back the way it was, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And the vehicles during the hours where it should be pedestrian only, that has to be enforced. Whether you guys use, someone mentioned something like a mechanically actuated bollards at the top and the bottom of the Washington streets, at the top end, north end and the south ends of the Washington streets, to block vehicular traffic from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. or whatever the hours that should be pedestrian only. I think that has to be implemented some way, somehow, and so whenever I'm walking on Washington Street, and I'm, one of those guys, I mean, I'm type A, so I'm walking in the middle of the street, but I'm always looking back to see who's
Mhm.
coming up, and with electric cars now, you don't even hear them until they're right up on your butt.
Mhm.
I mean, so I'm always looking behind, but I'm the one walking in the middle of the street. So I think that has to be implemented somehow in the plans. And and while you guys are improving the streets, I don't know if I'm sure this is not in your realm of responsibility, but what about, this is difficult for me to say because they are part of every city, but what about the homeless people and the panhandlers? And they're sort of part of the fixtures now, right?
Mhm.
Even though you guys can't do anything about it. And so I'm just wondering if that, if you guys are in talks with the city to to improve that somehow. Maybe it's a Michelle Wu problem, or the new lady that I can't even say her name for the city mayor.
Mhm.
So and they sort of detract from people trying to. They're just not attractive for the area, right? So those are some of the thoughts. And also, lastly, I think we need to have a clearly marked bike lanes. These bikes, some of these electric bikes are pretty fast, and
Mhm.
even one wheelers. I mean, those one wheel electric motor devices people ride on. I mean,
Mhm.
they're pretty fast, and they're just speeding down. And I think clearly separated, delineated bike lanes are crucial to success, I think. But just don't tear things up. I mean, that's the thing that I hate the most. It's beautiful with pavers, and they'll come in and always nitpicking at something. What is underground that you guys need to dig so much? It's like every day you got to dig somewhere,
Sure.
and then you just and then you guys just patch up with a band-aid.
Yeah.
And
So
leave.
So
Anyways, so
yeah,
those are some thoughts.
William, if you want, I can take the digging up the street question. And I
Sure.
know there was a bunch of other ones. Yes, this is a constant issue, not only in downtown Crossing, but citywide. And a lot of these they're cuts because of utilities. So whether it's, gas company, water and sewer, other utilities that need to get in there to make repairs. Boston is a very old city, so we have very aging infrastructure underground. So lots of times these things need to be repaired. And unfortunately, the reality is in a street like, well, any street, sometimes these repairs, it's difficult to get them repaired in a timely manner. And then when it's a challenging material, like pavers and everything, it's very challenging to get that to come back the way that it once looked. So then you see, the utility companies, they come in and they put asphalt in there, and then we got to figure out a way to get the pavers that were there, and they're not available and all that kind of stuff. So it's certainly a challenge. What we're looking for this project, and any project that we're moving forward that's a full-scale reconstruction project like this, is full utility coordination from the beginning. So what we do is we reach out to all the utility companies and we say, hey, we're going to be in these streets. What's the deal with your infrastructure in there? Do you need to do any upgrades? And if so, you need to get in there right now so that you can make all of those changes. So we'll be reaching out to water and sewer, the gas company and everything, to make sure that they have their most pristine infrastructure in place by the time that we come in the city, to put sort of the icing on the cake. And also, to put those surface materials on there to make sure that that's all coordinated. That being said, there's always things that happen. Again, there's aging infrastructure, there's development. So like a new building may come in and it needs utility connections for this and that. So in those efforts, we'll need to make sure that we chase them and chase the developers and everything to make sure that these things go back in place. We also want to pick materials that are, a lot of people had comments about, how they felt about bricks and in this type of paver and everything. So we really want to take a good look at that to make sure that we have materials that we can use and that we can replace in that manner, should the street need to be opened up, although we're hoping that we can do this and have it last for a long time without having to be cut open.
Yep. Thanks for that, Zach. And yeah, you and I mean, I completely agree with, that is an issue in this district and across the city. But to Zach's defense, it's not usually Public Works that's digging it up. It is the utility companies, and it's a source of frustration for us too, to be sure. But yeah, we fully intend to coordinate on that proactively, as Zach said, so that they don't come out and tear up our beautiful new streets just 2 days after we're done building it. I think the question on the enforcement of vehicular access is very well taken, and it's something that we're really keenly aware of too. And there's a lot of homework for us to do. Looking at peer cities and what options are available to to help kind of harden those entrances to the zone against unauthorized entrance. But also, as I said, it's very, very important. And our Boston Fire and EMS has been really adamant in the past that that they have quick, easy access. So we need to figure out something that we can get them to live with as well, because both things are really important, right, from a kind of a safety standpoint. As far as the bike lanes and the separation of space, that's another thing that we're thinking about as well. How to help all these modes better coexist. And I've seen other cities try to manage this through using different colored pavers and things like that to sort of try to suggest and delineate separate spaces. So that's certainly something that we could explore. And as far as the homeless population goes in the district, I mean, you are right, they're a part of the district. But I just have to reiterate that this is a project with Boston Transportation and Public Works, and that we're focused on the streets themselves. But there are a lot of other sort of departments at the city of Boston that are working to try to connect people who are experiencing homelessness with with support and services. And so that's about the best I can say there. Do we want to move on to the next question?
Sure. We have Susan. I see that your hand's raised.
Yes, hello there. Thank you very much for the presentation. It was very good. I guess my question is, I live in downtown Common, like you, and I'm pretty much down there every day. I think my question is really about that connectivity. You said just a moment ago, oh, we are focused on the streets, but I really think you need to have a more collaborative mindset, because there's the station entrances, and you said that the MBTA has a improvement plan as well. I wonder how connected you are with them. You also, somebody, Nathaniel in the chat, put about this 2023 Boston Tea Party celebration. So you've got a lot of things going on, and I wonder how connected you all are in order to make this a more all-round improvement to the whole area, because you talk about the streets, but we all know it's not just the streets, is it? It's about the stations. To me, I don't feel the shop fronts are very in keeping with the historic area. As you mentioned, there is that homeless problem. There's lots of issues actually that need to be addressed in that very small area. And I just wondered how focused you are on connecting with these other groups that are also trying to improve the area.
Yep, absolutely. So thank you for that question, Susan. So, the answer is that, while we are focused on what we can control as our two respective departments, the Transportation and the Public Works Department, we very much are sort of looking at that broader sort of ecosystem of stuff that's happening, around the district, without question. There is a BPDA planning initiative called Plan Downtown that's been on hold for some time because of the pandemic, but my understanding is that will be taking off again soon. And I've been involved in that. I was involved in that for months, sitting in on all those kind of discussions and meetings and public meetings around that, which does have a much sort of broader focus for thinking about the sort of things you're talking about the sort of broader character of the district. And I think you hit the nail on the head with, like, we also, I didn't really highlight it so much in the presentation, but we really do want to sort of think about how we're sort of reinforcing those connections to things like public transit. We have some ideas about how we could better tie Downtown Crossing into the public space across Tremont Street, with the Boston Common and Park Street Station. So we're certainly thinking about all of those aspects that you mentioned, and we fully intend to, this is kind of a broad sort of general meeting, but a next step is to also have more targeted conversations with a lot of the stakeholder groups in this district, which include sort of the cultural institutions and the historic sort of preservation groups, and obviously the MBTA, the downtown bid, have to show a lot of love and respect for them. They gave us tents for our pop-up, so thanks for that, and they do a great job keeping the place clean. So we definitely are in communication about a lot of different subjects that kind of intersect with the streets, and we really plan to lean very heavily on all of those actors who know about the stuff that maybe we don't. because of their particular roles and sort of areas of expertise and passions. So I hope that kind of answers that question. And I think you'll see some more of that kind of articulated as the project kind of moves forward and gets a little more developed.
We have another hand from Mark.
Okay. Go ahead, Mark.
Oh, Mark, you should be able to unmute.
Oh, hello. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hear you just
Okay,
fine.
perfect. Sorry, I'm watching on a VR headset, so I don't know if the mic is coming through. I just wanted to really congratulate the team on the presentation, and I really the past two comments have actually really resonated with me. I think I've lived in Boston for about 10 years, and I work as a transportation planner in Rhode Island, so I fully appreciate the issues of parochialism and sort of being able to deal with your sort of work within the bounds that you have. I think you've done a great job of trying to coordinate here to the extent you can, and I appreciate the reassurance that you're going to be doing a lot of work to sort of front end the utility work before any of this stuff happens. I think to the extent that it's been maintained, the plaza that's in the background on the screen right now in front of the Burnham building. I don't know what agreement has gone in there with the utility workers about actually returning the pavers, but that has actually been fairly successful. So kudos to that, and I hope to see that continue forward with whatever sort of maintenance agreements continue forward with this. I think coming back to sort of the general comments about sort of bikes, I do think that I do have sort of general concerns about tourists, especially who don't they don't know the area very well, and they're coming right off of the they might be trying to get to the Arch Street bike lane, and so they might be coming off of Tremont Street and just be cutting through winter and then onto summer trying to get there. So I think there's still some sort of real needs to sort of balance that sort of traffic, and I think you've done a decent job of showing that with the bollards. I think the bollards will definitely help sort of delineate a sort of a travel zone. How much people respect that, how much people on foot might respect that is kind of less the point so much as it's sort of delineates a space to properly expect vehicles, which isn't done so well on Winter Street today. I myself have tried to use Winter Street as a throughway when I used to work downtown. To bike up to Tremont, and before the Tremont Street protected bike lane existed, I'd bike through the Common, but now that exists, it's actually a decent facility. So again, I think you guys are on the right track here. I am especially encouraged by that particular intersection that you showed on School Street. As I was sharing in chat, I was actually there at the intersection when a woman driving a rental car from the auto dealership in a Lexus or whatever sped into and hit pedestrians at that intersection, and they were tourists as part of a Freedom Trail tour. So I think slowing that down and making people feel less like they're coming down, sort of the Death Star trench trying to get to that red light really helps. And especially because of how heavily trafficked that area is. I think everyone's been calling for the death of cities and because of COVID, and I don't see that actually happening anytime soon. So kudos to everybody for this work, both BTD and Public Works. So thank you again.
No, thank you, Mark, for those comments. Very thoughtful, and yeah, I think we have definitely some work to do in terms of kind of helping to encourage kind of that coexistence of the modes, and more on that thinking. In the next meetings, we'll certainly coordinate closely with our active transportation team at BTD, and look to to see what we can do to to, you know, like you said, better sort of delineate expected zones of travel. And yeah, so really appreciate sort of the full range of comments there. Do we have other questions or comments, other hands?
Currently, no hands have been raised, and Zach's and Kevin have done a great job in the chat, acknowledging those questions.
Yeah, if Kevin and I have missed any of your questions, feel free to raise your hand or let us know. I think we're trying to answer everything as best as possible.
Yoon, I see that your hand is raised. I'll go ahead and let you unmute yourself.
Yeah, one last quick question. Are adding restrooms in the area under you guys, or that's a bathroom department?
Bathroom department.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it is something that actually Anita and I from the bid have discussed at a very high level at some point. But no, that's not necessarily kind of like high priority in our scope at this point, but it could be something to consider, you know, at a later phase. So did you want to say something a little bit more about that? You see that as a positive thing?
You know, I think as we try to attract more people to that area, restroom becomes an issue, right? So, and
I think-
and certainly at nighttime as you're walking through, you can smell it. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
I hear you. I think one of the issues is that, you know, within the purview of Public Works and Transportation, like we, you know, you jokingly said bathroom department, we certainly aren't that. So we don't want to, you know, we don't really have the ability to put out something there that we can't actually maintain and operate. So the city doesn't really have a program for that right now. So I would say that that's probably not something that's really on the table, but I do understand your concern. So we're here.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Other comments or questions? You have us for the next half hour. So, you know, don't be shy. Looks like we've been pretty proactive at answering the questions that were typed in the chat, so that's good. Anybody at all? You know, don't want to miss anybody's question.
Susan, I see that your hand is raised. I'm going to let you unmute yourself.
Yeah, I mean, just to say again, thank you so much for the presentation. I can see you put a lot of work into it. I think, you know, a lot of us here live in the area and we can see lots and lots of improvements that we like, either extending it to other streets. You know, as I said, I walk down West Street and it's just awful. And as you said, there's the hygiene and the bathrooms, etc. So I think we would probably, as people who live here, really like to see more and more done actually to improve these streets. But we understand that you've got this more restrictive remit. So,
yeah, sure. I mean, you know, I'm not a fan of the siloed planning at all. You know, I think we get better outcomes when we can do the sort of coordination across, you know, departments and agencies. And but yeah, I don't want to overpromise either. You know, it's important to kind of manage expectations to some extent with that. So, but it is something that, you know, obviously we you know, we care about these other aspects too. And yeah, I mean, as far as other streets in the district like West Street, you know, that's totally hear you, kind of similar conditions to a street like Bromfield Street with the area ways, or, you know, the basements under the sidewalk and poor sidewalk conditions. And, you know, so maybe in a future phase, we can get around to spreading some love onto some of these other streets as well, because we definitely recognize that there's a need on a lot of the streets in the district. A lot of deferred maintenance, to be sure.
Yeah, I mean, William, I have seen a few comments on this, and I have, you know, our scope for this project is limited to those streets, as I've tried to share with folks. It's certainly not lost on us that our work here is really never done. It never ends. We have 800 miles of street in the city to take care of, and certainly, you know, West Street and other streets are streets that that we should definitely be looking at in the future. So yeah, you know, the focus of this project is definitely the downtown pedestrian area, but I hear you loud and clear. I recommended, you know, if there's West Street, we've heard that certainly here tonight. There's some other streets. Please do, if any street in town, like if you see an issue or whatever, please fill something out in the 311 system, so we make sure it gets in our you know, on our radar to make sure that we're looking at it. Obviously, you know, we're probably pretty aware of the assets, but there may be some stuff that we can't see, and we can maybe make some short-term repairs in the interim before it becomes an actual big project like this. So we understand that.
Yep, and I'll just say again, you know, my contact information is here. We are gonna, again, be posting this on the project webpage along with the presentation. So, you know, you can feel free to go back and watch the presentation again. Yeah, I definitely follow up if you have other questions. Don't hesitate to reach out. Anything else before we close for the evening?
No hands currently raised.
Okay, well, I'll give folks just one more moment if you want to get in a question. Okay, well, hearing none, if there are no other questions or comments, I think we can probably end just a couple minutes early, and people can get on with their evenings. So I just want to thank you again for coming out, you know, providing all that feedback, good questions, and you know, we hope you'll stay engaged in the project as it moves forward. And yeah, we really look forward to hopefully seeing some of these improvements implemented in our lifetimes. I'm joking, in the next few years. So yeah, thank you all again. And yeah, with that, I suppose we'll close the meeting.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you, everyone.